Parley P. Pratt. So Parley P. Pratt, we've had an occasion to talk about. Recall, he gets hold of the Book of Mormon. Reading is a burden. Sleeping is a burden. All he wants to do is, he wants to read this Book of Mormon. So eating, sleeping. Remember, he's a missionary to what? Lamanites. Remember, he's always your enthusiastic baptizer. And you'd say, Parley, is he one that falls? And I go, yeah, darkest days, Kirtland Safety Society. Okay, backing up for him. In the year 1836, temple is being built, and in 1836, Parley P. Pratt has arrived home from a mission. When he arrives home from a mission, Heber C. Kimball, remember, always faithful, knocks on the door and says, Parley, there are a group of people prepared for the gospel in Canada. You need to head out on this mission to Canada. Parley's not so interested. He just arrived home, but Heber prophesies that if you serve a mission, he said, I promise your wife, Thankful, who's never had any children, she will have a son. Now, Parley's still not too interested, but Thankful packs. Okay, the next day, here comes Joseph, and sure enough, it's a mission called, you are to go up to Canada. Well, as Parley works his way up to Canada, he keeps hearing the name John Taylor. John Taylor, at the time, he'd been a Methodist preacher. He's kicked out of the Methodist church. He's got small groups of people searching the Bible for what will it be like when the true church is upon the earth. Well, okay, Parley now concludes that perhaps John Taylor is the reason I've come on this mission. So Parley finds him, tries to tell him the gospel, but for John Taylor, he doesn't want to hear the gospel from somebody that's a frontiersman. John Taylor is a gentleman. And suddenly he doesn't want to hear the gospel from somebody whose language isn't like his, who's from an insurrectionist colony called the United States. And so Parley becomes discouraged. He finds a widow that takes him in for the night. He says, sure, I'd like to share the gospel with you. But she says, oh, no, tonight is my night to listen to the great John Taylor. And Parley said, well, I'd like to listen to him too. Well, all right, John's topic that night was, where are there apostles today? Now, if there's ever been the golden moment, golden convert, this is your time. And as John, he was a very fiery speaker. He hits the apex of his talk, and he goes, where is there a Peter, James, or a John? He said, I would even gladly take a Paul. Suddenly, Parley jumps up, and he goes, I'm here. And pretty soon, suddenly at the widow's house, Parley's now holding little Bible study classes himself. And John's kind of like, where are all my friends going? I want to protect him. And finally he decides, well, I'm going to go listen to Parley. I'm going to listen to 8 of his preachings. I'm going to compare it with the gospel and the Bible. I'm then going to come back and I'm going to show where he's all wrong. Well, finally, after listening to 8 sermons, comparing them to the Bible, he now goes to Parley and he says, will you forgive me and will you baptize me? Well, okay, John Taylor is now baptized. Parley gets word his wife has now delivered a son. He now says to John, I'm going home. I want to see my son. And he says, John, you be head of the church in Canada. Well, new convert, now head of the church in Canada. As Parley starts to leave, he says, now I just have a word of caution. He said, if any man, if an angel, or if I myself were to say Joseph's a fallen prophet, it's not true. Well, with that, Parley now hurries back to Kirtland. He sees his son, but he arrives back just at the time that Kirtland Safety Society, they're giving back 12.5 cents on the dollar. Parley is now listening. His friends, some of them have taken over the temple. Parley hasn't joined him in taking over the temple, but there's no question he's taken time off. Joseph writes him a letter. Parley doesn't respond. Joseph comes to see him. Parley won't come to the door. Parley writes, these are my darkest days. In other words, it's like he's sitting on the fence. He's not for Joseph. He's not against Joseph, but he's listening, but he's sitting on the fence. In the meantime, John Taylor, now in a great poverty, he concludes, I want to go down to Kirtland, Ohio. I want to meet this great translator of the Book of Mormon. But as he works his way down, his first thought is, I'm going to see my great old returned missionary. Now, they're going to find you. You are the church to them. You are still, your picture's on the mantle. For the men, you still wear white shirts and ties, the kind of, and the plaque kind of thing. I mean, you are the church to these guys. I have one man I helped bring in that he has a little store, and my picture's on his cash register. And every time it dings, he thinks of me, and I'm like, oh, okay, so you are the church to these people. Well, okay, here comes John Taylor. Now, he can't really afford it, but he comes down to Ohio, and before he sees Joseph, he wants to see his great old returned missionary. He knocks on the door, Parley comes to the door, and Parley's first comment was, John, you shouldn't have come. Have you not heard in Upper Canada, Joseph Smith is a fallen prophet? Suddenly you get the great old convert, now grabs his returned missionary and shakes the heck out of him. You've got to, have brought somebody in the church that's going to do that for you. I brought in this guy that, although he's in his 70s, he still wears cat-eye glasses, big beard, used to be a bouncer in a bar. And, I said to him, you see me messing up, you can beat me up. And he goes, I'd love to. So, okay. So here's John Taylor. He grabs Parley P. Pratt, and he says, do you remember what you just last told me when I saw you last? And Parley, he'd spaced it. It's like it's out there somewhere, but he doesn't remember. And so John said, you told me if any man, an angel, or if you were to tell me Joseph's a fallen prophet, it's not true. Parley now begins to sob, and John says, let's go see Joseph together. Parley goes, oh, I can't. He's come to the house, he's written me letters, I can't go. And John says, oh, yes, you can, I'll be right by your side. And you get this amazing, the convert literally saving the apostle. And Joseph then, thrilled that Parley is back, wants to know what brought you back. And he said, meet the man I went to Canada to baptize. This is John Taylor. So you look at Parley and you say, no court action. And it's like he had a fence-sitting time. He's back in and dies faithful in the church, never losing his position, but did know these were my darkest hour, time of Kirtland Safety Society. Okay, the next one is actually, you find pretty interesting. Okay, so you got Parley. The next man was William Smith. He is the brother of who? Okay, Joseph, right? Okay, so, all right, so he's a younger brother of Joseph. For William Smith, so you get Samuel, William, there's a Don Carlos, there was Alvin, there's Hiram. Okay. For William Smith, obviously he's the only Smith called to serve in the Quorum of the 12. For William Smith, when he was young, and remember those mobs that would come there in Palmyra when Joseph had the gold plates? The family literally cheered William at age 10 for chasing off the mob. And you'd say, what did William have going for him? Oh, well, he had a really bad temper. And, the family thought it was good at first, but he has a real big problem. He never gets over it. So you'd say at one point in Kirtland, he and Joseph were talking, and he said he wanted to form some kind of debate society, and Joseph couldn't see the value of it. He thought, contention, he didn't think it was a good idea. And William literally beat up Joseph so that the next day Joseph couldn't even stand. And you get the same experience being repeated in Nauvoo. That William would literally hide in an alley and there beat up Joseph, but notice he's still in the Quorum of the 12. And you're like, buddy, you got this weakness, you just gotta, you gotta stop it. And Joseph, at one point when he gets back after the second beating, he was asked, well, did you fight him back? And Joseph's comment was, I could never hit my brother. Now, okay. So here's William Smith. He's got a weakness. It's a pretty big weakness, but here's another. When Joseph dies, William, he's still in the quorum of the 12. So notice he escapes the Kirtland Safety Society. He's faithful, but he's about to blast out. And you'd say, what's going to take him out? Well, for William Smith, at the death of Hiram, Joseph, Hiram both die in 44, William becomes not only a member of the 12, but he is made the patriarch to the church. And as patriarch, he starts to give pretty unusual patriarchal blessings. You'd say he does the tribe, all right, and here's what you should do, but you could always tell who were the beautiful women that received a blessing, because then he would promise these women, lucky you get somebody better in the next life, and it's me. And you're like, well, well, okay, you got a real problem. Because her husband's building on the Nauvoo temple with the idea they'll be sealed for all eternity, and a patriarchal blessing is written down, and suddenly the husband is now marching over to see Brigham Young to say, what's this? I thought I got to be sealed to my wife. Who is this William Smith? Well, Brigham now has a reason to call in William. William's comment is, what is a Young doing telling us Smith what to do? Now, that's a big comment. Okay, the result, as time now goes on, William will leave the church. He will form his own church. He will take his church to Kentucky, and Brigham Young commented about William's church. He said William's church was so popular that William was the first presidency, William was the quorum of the 12, and William was his entire congregation. So you look at William and you'd say, oh, what's taking you out? And you'd go, wow, pride is just sapping this guy. Okay, we now come to another William. His name is William McClellan, and he's your bad guy. And you'd look and you'd say, well, wait a minute, others had weaknesses. And I go, oh yeah, pride figures in. You get all kinds of things, but William McClellan. William McClellan, Kirtland Safety Society. William McClellan, prior to the Kirtland Safety Society, and actually prior to joining the church, had supported himself as a school teacher. After he's a member of the Quorum of the 12, Joseph is very anxious, like with the Book of Mormon witnesses, that there be witnesses of the what eventually becomes Doctrine and Covenants. And so he wants the 12 to sign their signatures, saying that they could accept this book as revelations from God. And every member of the 12 signs it, but William McClellan, he holds out. And he says to Joseph, I can write better revelations than you claim you have just received from God. And it's interesting, the Lord challenges William McClellan to a revelatory duel. In other words, okay, buddy, try your luck. Just write it on out. Well, when McClellan concludes, well, I can't do it. I can't write as good as Joseph, who has little schooling and never been a school teacher, he finally becomes the last signature. As a result, what trait do you think he has that, is an issue? Okay, a lot of pride, right? Going for the man. Well, okay. For William McClellan, he is one of the principals of the anti-banking company. Okay, so as a principal of this anti-banking company, he didn't have a lot of money in the bank. In other words, but he had a dream. And his dream was that it would be a huge success. So, you know how you have a dream that you're going to marry, and suddenly here's your 3-car garage. You're going to have the movie stars home, and all these wonderful things. Well, that was McClellan. He had this amazing dream that he would make a lot of money on the bank. When the bank failed, and the average investor, remember getting back 12.5 cents on the dollar, suddenly McClellan, his dream is destroyed. And as a result, he begins to stalk Joseph, which means, okay, what does stalking mean? You don't never want to do this. Okay, you're following a guy and you're an unwanted person that follows you. You're stalking, look outside and there you are again and there you are. Okay, so he's now stalking Joseph, looking for the right time to beat him up. Okay, as we get more into the Missouri period, we're going to learn that Joseph Smith at one point was in a jail called Richmond Jail. And while there, he's chained. There are 9 men, including Joseph, and they're all chained together. And McClellan is looking for, I want to find someplace where Joseph is, where I can beat him up, and basically he doesn't want to get hurt. Well, okay. There was a night, as Joseph is chained with these men, that the militia, who have their guns now facing Joseph and fellow prisoners, they start talking about the horrible things that they have done to men, women, and children. And Parley P. Pratt, who's chained up, wonders, should I stand up and say something? And he says, as he's thinking about it, he then says, about midnight, he begins to hear this chain rattle. And suddenly, Joseph Smith now stands up, and he says, Parley says, he roars like a lion. And Parley says, he says, silence ye fiends of the infernal pit. In the name of Jesus Christ, or you or I will die this instant. And it's always called the night the guards quaked. They got down on the ground, they're apologizing to Joseph, what a night they've had. And the next morning, who shows up but this William McClellan, and he's got a club. And he now says to the jailer, I want to beat up one of your prisoners. And the jailer thinks, oh, fun sport, which one? And then he points to Joseph, but he wants Joseph to stay chained. And he's going to have the club and keep him chained up. And the jailer says, no, if it's that man, it's going to be a fair fight. We are never going to have a night like we had last night. And at which point Joseph, who actually liked to fight, he goes, hey, he thought it would be okay. You got a club, I'm in chains, yeah, I think we're okay. And so McClellan goes away, and he comes back, he has a new idea. And his idea is, he has a club, and he says, you can take the chains off of Joseph, but you got to make sure you can never get the club from me. And Joseph thinks, oh, that's okay. But the jailer goes, no, in other words, our night. Well, what does McClellan do? Instead of then wanting to attack Joseph, his conclusion, he goes into the town of Far West, breaks into the home where Emma is now living, and she has 4 children. Now you realize it's one thing to attack a prophet, but try attacking, breaking into the home where the prophet's wife is. Well, okay. She's got now 4 living children. Who's her oldest? Julia. Okay. So she's got a 7-year-old Julia. She's got, others. She's got 2 babies in arms. He literally breaks in. He steals her possessions, leaving her to cross the state 200 miles, and then to take her children crossing. She crosses on ice on the Mississippi River. And you'd say, well, who leaves her in such poverty? And I go, oh, who's the stealer? It's a man named William McClellan. Well, okay, what happens to this guy? You can leave Mormonism, but you ever known the person that can never leave it alone? Yeah, that's him. He's, one time he concludes, well, I'll be president of the church. And the church is being restored a second time, and it's under me. Well, that lasts a couple of years and gone. And you'd say, well, how does he meet his death? The Doctrine and Covenants. How does Satan claim his own? Okay, you'd say, how does he die? He dies by drowning. And you go, oh, McClellan, life is not good for you. Well, okay, I have time to do one last more. You stand it? Well, look at you guys, and then we'll hit on Monday. Some of you going, yeah, I'm stunned. Okay. We're going to do Orson Pratt. Of all of the ones that I would say gets my sympathy, it goes to Orson Pratt. Orson Pratt was actually lived the longest of any of the original Quorum of the 12. And you'd say for him, he is your big writer of the group. And he talked about, I miss the sunrise and the sunsets. And he explained going bald because he had spent so much time thinking. and and writing, so here's him. At one point, you may have heard that Brigham Young and Orson Pratt didn't always agree. And, maybe that's how you are, in families and life. But at one point, someone was suggesting that Orson Pratt doesn't really know the doctrine and that he should be reprimanded. And Brigham Young said of Orson Pratt, he said, if you were to take his body and to chop it in 1-inch strips, every strip would scream the Book of Mormon is true, so you leave him alone and you leave him to me. Well, okay. So here's our man, Orson Pratt. When Parley, his brother, and notice, Parley, when he shares the Book of Mormon, one of the first he'll share it with is his younger brother, Orson. So when Parley is teetering on the Kirtland Safety Society issue, Orson Pratt is not. And you'd say, Orson Pratt, faithful, faithful, faithful. And then in the 1840s, he moves to a place eventually called Nauvoo. He's been called as a mission. Remember, apostle, one who is sent. He's been called to England. As he leaves to go to England, he puts a man as a renter into his house named John C. Bennett. Now, John C. Bennett woes from beginning to end, but okay. Meantime, Orson serves a mission. When he comes back from that mission, Orson discovers that his wife is no longer very interested in him. Okay, she has now connived with this John C. Bennett to indicate that she's had an issue, but it was Joseph Smith, it wasn't anyone else. Well, you can imagine all of this now gets pretty muddy. And Orson Pratt concludes that his wife has had some kind of illicit relationship with Joseph. He now goes to see Joseph. Joseph denies it. In other words, no, Orson, what are you talking about? Orson believes his wife, and he says to Joseph, take my name off the books. In other words, blot it out. I never wanted it associated that I ever knew you. Well, okay, Joseph's okay if that's what you want. Well, Orson Pratt, he's a smart man. Within a few weeks, he's figured out his wife has had an issue, but it wasn't with Joseph. For Orson Pratt, he's pretty down and out. And his conclusion is he will take his life and that he will drown himself in the Mississippi River. And so he says goodbye to his wife, and he goes down to the river to contemplate, my life is over. In other words, I denied a prophet. I've had all these issues. They're just more than I can bear. In the meantime, his wife now runs to Joseph, tells Joseph. Joseph now interrupts his meeting and indicates to all present, fan out down by the river and find me my friend, Orson Pratt. If I were to say one incredible trait of the prophet Joseph, forgiveness, time and time again, it's just like that. And, okay, when Orson Pratt is found, instead of committing suicide, he's baptized. Okay, he does go under the water, but a complete remission of sins, and he is now welcomed back not only into the church, but back in the quorum of the 12. Okay, remember the year 1875, okay? Brigham Young has just spoken to Orson who? Hyde. And Orson Hyde, he said, hey, Orson, you need to step down. Who'd serve longer in faithfulness? Okay, John Taylor. Waiting also in the hall was this Orson Pratt. Brigham Young now called in Orson Pratt, said, I've been thinking about the year 1841. Tell me, did Orson Pratt forget? No. Okay. And Orson said, oh, I repented. Brigham said, I know that, but there's someone who served longer in faithfulness than you. What's his name? Okay, there's John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff. Okay, do you see that? So you'd say in 1875, prior to being called in, you had Orson Hyde, Orson Pratt, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff. After the meeting, who's then the president of the quorum? John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, Orson Hyde, Orson Pratt. Okay, now, I'm going to, the big question is, what have we learned today? What have you learned I didn't tell you? Okay, stay faithful. It's not worth that dropout, right? Okay, because you're going to miss all kinds of opportunities in life. Okay, what else are you learning?
You have to be perfect to become a prophet.
Okay, if you're going to be the prophet, once you've entered baptismal waters, you better keep your covenants all the way, right? Because the Lord won't call you as a prophet. Okay, good. What else are you learning?
If you do off the path, repent.
Okay, if you go off the path, repent quick. In other words, don't just go, hey, I'm going to sit on the back row, maybe I'm walking out. You know, you're going to hang in. Okay, what else are you picking up? Okay, forgive. Okay.
A lot.
Okay, forgive quick, forgive a lot. You're going to be offended time and time again, you know, on a daily basis. You know, you forgive like that. Did you also pick up, when I'm unforgiving and when I've done something just so messed up, my head, it's like, you know, torpedoes are going off, you know, it's World War III, it's nuclear, you know, it's horrible. But you'd say, how do you know that you've been forgiven and it's over? You're going to remember it, but it's not going to hurt. It's kind of like, you know, here's BBs. You know, you got something up there, you remember something, but it doesn't have that same hurt because you got this incredible peace. The Lord loves me, and, you know, I'm not going to do that again. Okay, and did you see that? You get the ultimate, you know, Harley P. Pratt goes, darkest days, but now I can talk about it, but I don't have that same hurt. Okay, anything else you're picking up? Well, so did you like it? Okay.
How did they react when Brigham told them that? Like, did they just say, okay?
You know, so the question is, how do they react
Yeah.
when he says, hey, you've been the president of the quorum, now step down? You know, they sense of obedience. You know, remember when we did about Book of Mormon, that exact obedience, you just can't miss. You know, it's hard to do, but it's there.